Yo, what's up? It's your boy E.T. Welcome to another edition of Mass Impact, the educational podcast. Now, look, the reason why I started this, I truly believe that education is the way to close the gap, the wealth gap, the digital divide gap, the opportunity gap. Look, the American dream gap. Can I be honest? Everybody's not experiencing the American dream in the way it's supposed to be experienced. So the reason why we started the Mass Impact, the educational podcast, is to close that gap. Now look, mass is simple. It means motivate, actionable steps, which means what? We're going to give you strategies every week. So we're not just going to motivate you and inspire you, which is important, but we're going to give you actionable steps. And look, it's a support system, y'all. Thus Mass. It's your boy E.T. Now you know. Let's go.
Yo, what's up? It's your boy E.T. Hey, always excited, man. First of all, for life. And then I just feel like, as an educator, man, one of the greatest jobs you can have in this country, is really preparing young people, to be, American citizens, and to be productive. I remember when I was, my kids were in school, my daughter's thing was, she'd come home. I won the citizenship. Like that was her big thing. Like she was, she won citizenship, and so that's what we have the opportunity to do, not just talk about the problems in this world, but we have an opportunity to affect the people, who one day will be the leaders of the world. And we're super excited about that. As you guys know, this is Mass Impact, Motivate, action steps, support system. You have four of us, who are literally, put years into the school system. Of course, all my degrees are K through 12. I taught for 7 years, K through 12, and then I was at Michigan State for 5 years. And man, just super excited about, again, not just hearing the problems, but coming up with programs to actually help solve the problems, whether that's teachers, parents, students. And I got my guy, Vondell. Vondell, just real quick, Vondell, I know you are a problem solver. You've done a lot around not just schools, but around youth, period, in Chicago. Can you talk to us about that? Oh, and I must say, I started my academic career in Alabama, Huntsville, Alabama. And then I went from Huntsville to Lansing, and pretty much I've been all over the world, with this thing. But I know you've affected Chicago deeply, Vondell, with your work. So if you could just, give us a little backdrop.
Yeah, sure. So just a little bit about my background. I'm a former educator. I was an elementary education major about 20 years ago. So I've been in the field working in primary, high school, college, you name it. Served as a school teacher, dean, an administrator. So for me, this is what I love to do. Now I'm doing Champs full time. And Champs is culturally helping and making positive success. It's a social emotional learning mentoring program for boys and young men of color throughout Chicago. We're in about 15 different schools, suburbs, South Side, West Side, community-based and school-based programs. Then we have a few chapters outside of the state as well, about 15 different chapters outside of the state. So I love what I do. It's a privilege to be able to learn and grow and share, and looking forward to continuing the conversation.
Let's get it. I love it. Sam, talk to us. Yeah. You were in St. Louis, right? Did you serve anywhere else other than St. Louis originally?
Oh, you're on mute, Sam. We can't hear you.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. No, that's where I got started for sure, E. So I was a special education teacher for 8 years. And then within the same school in St. Louis, I moved into school leadership and served as dean of students, where we started a 9th grade academy and built up each year there within the school, and served there for 3 years. And so in the midst of all that, as a teacher, started a project called Show Me Costa Rica, where our students were demanding the opportunity to be able to travel internationally after they realized that students just about 8 miles up the road had that opportunity within their school system. And so now I work a lot with other educators to develop social entrepreneurship initiatives, nonprofits, for-profits to impact our education ecosystem. And I also get to lead the Show Me the World project, where we are expanding our reach, and our whole mission is to provide transformational educational opportunities for students, including their first time traveling abroad, to youth and under-resourced communities. So that's a little bit of my background, and I also have a few degrees also around education, leadership, and special education as well.
Yeah, when we're trying to recruit / steal her, expand her beyond the Costa Rica project to Dubai, and supporting us in the work that we're doing. So she'll be going to Dubai with us here shortly. Or by the time you watch it, we might even be in Dubai. Who knows? And then, of course, our fearless leader, Katie. Katie, give us your background.
Yeah, sure. I was in the classroom and leading groups of teachers for 15 years. So I have a reading specialist master's degree, and you guys hear me talk about books all the time. That's where my passion is. I've taught kindergarten, first, second grade, spent a lot of time in those primary grades, and then co-founded the Literacy Camp with the mission to grow and develop a love for reading and writing among students at a young age. And so we do that in the summertime. And then I made the jump from elementary school to high school, which is a little bit of a crazy jump. I know, Vandil, you made that jump too. And I decided I love high schoolers too. I worked a lot with high schoolers who were working to increase their literacy skills and their literacy scores and dropout prevention, and students of that needed a little extra support, and those became my favorite kiddos too. So I spent 15 years in all of those multiple grade levels, and now I'm working with E full time, and we're working on, you've heard us talk about the Playbook program, and our goal there with Access EDU is to increase literacy and leadership skills in low-income communities and across the nation. So we're really excited about that work too.
Yeah, and I think people need to understand, there is a direct correlation between a person's comprehension level, not just comprehension level, critical thinking, vocabulary. And this is why we're so big on it, because I just look at myself and where I was academically, in high school to where I am now, and just how it impacts my career, and it impacts my influence, and even my income, what I'm able to make, versus being a speaker who was working on a 4-year degree versus a speaker with a PhD, a speaker who, was failing English to not writing books, so we're not just doing it, just because it's something fun to do, but we understand the impact, it can make. Sam talks about entrepreneurship and traveling the world. Your level of exposure often determines your level of success, and so we know that, for kids to see, it changes your mind. Once your mind is exposed to certain things, like, you can never go back. The mind can never go back to its original dimensions, and then of course, what Vandil is doing, the social emotional piece is just so critical, because it doesn't matter if you're a professional. It doesn't matter if you make good money. It doesn't matter if you're changing the world. If you are not sound, sound mind, sound body, so we really, really enjoy impacting, our people. And here's the deal. I have been fortunate to work with everybody here. I've been able to support them in their programs, whether it's the Literacy Camp, whether it's Vandil's CHAPS programs, whether it was being in the high school with Sam. So I'm blessed, to be able to be a part of this squad, and to be able to be at some point in their world and see the impact. And I'm suggesting that if you have an opportunity, you want to come and observe too, because as a teacher, you can learn so much from watching them do what they do. But anyway, Katie, that's not the topic. Can you tell us what the topic is today?
You bet. We're going to switch gears from, we've been talking about teacher effectiveness. I think this could fall, under teacher effectiveness as well too. And we're talking about loving and caring about all of our students and helping make sure that they feel welcome. And so we're going to talk about the topic of how to be an anti-racist teacher or educator today, what that looks like in the education space, from lots of different perspectives.
Good. But as we get started, I definitely want to say that, when you hear that term, you may be a little defensive, right? And I just think it's important for us to understand that, we got to eat our own food, meaning that we can't just be in an environment where we're constantly telling our kids to learn and improve and get better. And we feel that we don't have a need to improve or get better. And I don't care what area it is for me. As a father, I know I could do better. A pastor, I know a leader. Like I know I can improve. Like I know, and when I say improve, it's not a it's not a strike against what I currently know and who I currently am. Like it doesn't mean I'm inadequate. It doesn't mean that I should feel some type of way. Actually, what it's saying is that I can get better. I can improve, right? So for me, of course, the term racist is not something that I can speak directly to, but what I can speak to is biases. Mm-hmm. And we all have our own biases. I know studying the assessment, one of the things that I love about the flight assessment is that I recognize when I figured out there were 4, learning styles, if you will, or preferences of how people like, to do things, I realized that I have a preference for relationships and experience, and when I set my classroom up, if you are a relational person, if you love experience, you're going to love my class, but if you're more structured, if you're a person that needs a lot more detail, right? If you're a person that needs a professor who, forecasts a lot, that what you weren't going to always enjoy my class. It was a lot of last minute. It was a lot of spontaneous. That was the environment. But of course, when I learned the assessment, I realized, okay, you have a bias toward emotional kids. You have a bias toward, even visual and audio learning. Like I didn't necessarily like the test taking construct, or I didn't like, it's just a lot of things that there wasn't my preference. And I didn't even realize as a teacher, I was being biased. But again, going through the assessment, I did realize, oh, okay, here's your strengths. Here are the other 3 characters that you don't favor as much as you favor this one. And so as you're doing your lesson plan, as you're thinking about the school year, as you're thinking about what learning activities the students will do to figure out where they are, you need to be a little bit more multidimensional. Like you kind of one-dimensional here, And so for me, I had to really realize that you could have never told me I was biased. Like, you could have never told me I didn't, love every student and didn't set every student up for success. But actually, doing the assessment, I realized that wasn't the truth. I too had a bias, and I needed to learn the strengths of other learners, and I needed to incorporate their strengths, in my lesson plan, and just my complete format of teaching. You know what I'm saying? So yeah. So again, can't speak to racists, but I can speak to have my own biases, and I needed to acknowledge that I had those biases. I needed to spend more time learning the other styles and being with people, who were dominant in those styles. And then I needed to make sure that I incorporated those styles and consistently, because I also realized that I had a challenge of doing it for a moment, but not doing it for the entire 180 days. And I realized it was something that I needed to make sure I did, throughout the entire school year.
And I think when I think about the path to being an anti-racist teacher, I think that is the first step, right? Is like acknowledging your own biases and privilege, because we do have a systemic problem that has like created an unequal society. And so being able to, like you said, do that reflection, right? Like about the privileges and power you may hold, or, how did your upbringing influence your identity and assumptions? And so, thinking about I can give an example of, let's say that you enter into a school building as a first year teacher, right? And not just for first year teachers, like this is ongoing, right? Ongoing journey. And you're a stickler for time. Everybody needs to be on time, right? And I'm going to shut the door and I'm going to lock it like right at 8:00 when that bell rings. And it doesn't matter. Like, that's it. That's over with. Like, anybody that's late, it doesn't matter. I'm not going to take the time to figure out why they were late or whatnot. Just like, let's go. And so, you know, maybe from your perspective is that there's no reason that anybody should ever be late, right? And maybe why are you thinking that, right? And what are maybe some other things that might be happening in other worlds outside of your own, right? That you might not have experienced yourself. And so I think it is like a constant interrogation of just like, who am I? Like, what was my path to thinking the way that I did or the way that I do? And how do other people think and experience life, and continuing that journey and like continuing breaking down different biases that you have and operate with. So I think that is the first step for sure.
Yeah. And I'll be honest, I think we regardless of what side you're on, you know, we have to make sure that information is given to our students to help empower our students. I think sometimes when we deal with things that are, you know, tough challenges or things that are difficult to talk about, but our realities, we tend to kind of want to pretend it doesn't exist. So we don't like to talk about stuff that makes us uncomfortable. But I'll give you guys an example. I saw something the other day that I was like, I need to bring this to the attention of our young people, especially, Sam, you talk about entrepreneurship. And in some schools, you know, entrepreneurship needs to be taught because economics has a lot to do with, you know, the type of experience a person has, right? Yeah. It has a lot to do. Like you just mentioned, one school, they traveling abroad. Another school. And so when people always ask, like, why you do the Super Bowl? Why you do Dubai? For that exact reason. Like when I was at Oakwood, I never heard of a study abroad program at our HBCU. I never heard of that before. It wasn't until I got to Michigan State and I was like, y'all got a school in Dubai? Like Michigan State actually had a branch or division in Dubai. So that's how I first became familiar with Dubai. So I had one of our supervisors, or whatever you call her, like she would go to Dubai, and a couple of my, you know, those individuals, not my immediate supervisor, you know, but the dean or whatever, like they would go to Dubai. And I was like, yo, that's dope. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, yo, Michigan State, and you got credit for it. Like kids would go study abroad and get like 3 credits, 6 credits. And I was like, yo, this is at an institution that's 90%, 93% Caucasian. You feel me? So a percentage of the kids that were minorities weren't even getting the opportunity. So they were at Michigan State, but they weren't getting the opportunity. So for me, it was like, yo, we got to have these discussions. Like we got to talk. Are we doing study abroad or are we not doing study abroad? Like, is that just for a certain group or is that for everybody? You know, and so something alarming that I saw, we talking about entrepreneurship and why our schools, especially urban schools whose parents may not necessarily have the money, need to really think it through. I saw something where President Trump I guess he's going for re-election. And one of the things he said was, you know, if he wins the presidency again, you know, any individual that gets caught selling drugs, they're going to get the death penalty. You know, I was like, oh, okay, like that's something that.
Saw that.
That's I was like, that's something we need to talk to our students about. You know what I'm saying? Because unfortunately, right, wrong, or indifferent, drugs is something that is done in our communities as a way, you know, for economics, right? And again, I always say this: we didn't create the opportunity, but the opportunity is there. So then, what you're saying is, I don't know what percent. I got to go do my homework before I make a statement. But I just know that there's a significant amount of young people in urban communities, you know, who are selling drugs, and you're about to get the death penalty. So it's like, oh, no. If it was ever a time you needed to enhance your reading skills, if you ever needed to increase your vocabulary, if you ever needed to test better so you can get in college and get in college for free, if you ever needed to be a critical thinker, like that time is not, right? Not that I promote anything illegal, but I'm saying now you're talking about the death penalty. Like if he's reelected, like that has major implications on the school systems that I primarily work with, And so I just think this is something that is deep, but we never talk to our students about it. Like it's not a course. It's not something that's in our lesson plan, and it needs to be in our lesson plan. That there are prejudice, there are bias, and there are races. And you need to prepare yourself for it, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if it's right or wrong, but you have to equip yourself to be able to get every resource you could possibly get to put yourself in. Again, like I said, before I pass it on, I know the difference between me and a lot of the people I grew up with, and even family members, is that I had an opportunity to get a master's and a PhD. It just is what it is. I'm not smarter than my family members. I'm not smarter than a lot of people on the block. I don't consider myself to necessarily be an intellect, but getting an opportunity to go to Michigan State, getting a master's degree and a PhD in a department that was #1 in the world, right? So K through 12, when I was in that program, was at a higher level than Yale's, Harvard's.
MSU,
right? That's like, that has a major, the professors I had, the conferences that we had to go to, the scholars that we brought in, the activities we did, like it made a difference. But I will say it was probably 1 or 2 of us in a program of 30. It definitely wasn't 50-50. And so this is why this topic is so important. I'm not done, but Katie, take it away.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking of the teacher that maybe initially thinks like, well, this isn't a topic for me. Because that's not me. I love all of my kids, and this is not an issue for me because I love and accept them all. And so for me, I would admit that maybe I have thought that way in the past, but I love the Martin Luther King Jr. quote that is, in the end, we will not remember the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. And I just love that quote so much that I want to make sure that I am a part of the group that is not the friends that are silent. So I think because of that, we can't take the stance of this doesn't apply to me. And so, to me, I think I always in this topic just lean into learning and listening from others, including our students. So I think that was the best way for me to show my kids that I loved and accepted all of them, was to make sure that I was listening to their experiences and not ever pretending like I knew what they were. But that I was somebody that would listen to them. And I think that's all that our kids really care about. They want to know that you love and care about them and that you will listen to them and not pretend that you know every experience that they've been through, but that you're willing to listen and learn from them. And then, I'm going to bring up books again. I think another way that we help our kids to feel loved and seen is to make sure that they can see themselves in text. And so, again, I wish that I had done a little research before. I have done this research as a part of my master's program at this same university you're talking about, but I don't know the facts off the top of my head. But they are significant when we look at representation and diversity in books in our classrooms. So I'll go look those up and try to bring them back for us later. But if you were, as an educator, just to look at the books on your shelves and the characters in your books, whether they're fiction or nonfiction, and then look at the kids in your classroom, and see if they reflect each other, probably, and I'm sorry I don't have the statistics, but probably most of us might realize that there's a disconnect. And so I would challenge you to make sure that you have books that kids can see themselves in and relate to, for sure. That's one way that really, really be helpful.
Yeah, well, Katie, I want you to speak to this, because one of the things that I think that you're doing that's, phenomenal, besides not being silent, which is very important. I see a lot going on right now in today's society, and I don't know if I think the artist is The Game. I think that's who it was, but The Game made a statement this week where he was saying, once the AMA, I guess it was, for whatever reason, they decided, they weren't going to do the Chris Brown tribute. And I guess that had a lot to do with it. I guess he was doing a tribute for Michael Jackson, right? And so The Game was just saying, hey, for everybody that this affects, don't be silent. The Game was just saying, hey, I'm not necessarily saying that, we should be evil, but The Game was like, yo, this affects somebody. And there are those of you who it it's not directly affecting, but it kind of is sort of directly affecting you, like you should actually stand up and say something. And I think what you said is important because oftentimes evil people are very vocal. You know what I'm saying? They're very vocal.
Yeah.
Right. And they use their power.
Mm-hmm.
And I think to Martin Luther King's point, a lot of times good people just, don't want to, I guess, ruffle the feathers, or I don't know what it is they don't want to do because I'm not privileged to be on that side. You know what I'm saying? But I can imagine that's what it is. Like they don't want to lose their privilege or whatever. But one of the things that I'm super grateful for having you on the team is I'm making an assumption that the school district you went to is the school district you taught in for the majority of your career, right? Mm-hmm. And so those kids, of course, in the community that you grew up in, were privileged to have you as a teacher. But now to watch you give a diverse group of students your skill set, to me, it's like, yo, this is dope. Like, you know what I'm saying? She's not only taking care of home, right? But she's on the dream team. You know what I'm saying? She playing for the dream team. You know what I'm saying? Like, and she's helping kids in every community now. Can you kind of tell me, how that feels for you, being able to not only empower where you come from, which is definitely important because I think we're all guilty of doing that. Like we're all guilty of providing for the communities where we come from, right? But what does it feel like to go in some of these other communities and serve? And, what has been your experience? Or what would you say to other teachers who have not come out of, just maybe suburban or rural schools, and not been able to go into other schools that need it just as much?
Yeah, I think all of our kids are important everywhere, right, is the bottom line. So I think different people are called into different spaces and none of them are a wrong place to be. So I feel like I have just stepped into where God asked me to be right now. And that's going to be different for everybody listening, right, of where you feel like you are supposed to be right now. But specifically when you said, like, how does it feel to see this for kids? I'm thinking about, you also mentioned the importance of kids increasing their vocabulary and their comprehension. And often the kids that I've worked with, they're so smart, and motivation is a big piece of the struggle for reading. And so I always am thinking of that and want to say that I want kids to hear, like, it's not that we don't think you have the skills and we have to come in and fix you or give you all these new literacy skills because you aren't capable of them. But these kids are brilliant, but a lot of times they just don't have the reading motivation for some reason. And if we can help increase that motivation piece, then the comprehension and the vocabulary and all of those things follow. So it's really that's I think my passion is to be able to see that in all kinds of kids and all kinds of communities, for them to feel motivated to take control of their learning and their education so that they can go to the next level. So one of the school districts we were in recently, I love connecting them with resources that are in their own communities too. I think that's important, that we don't come into a community and as a team, I love being a part of this dream team, but I don't ever want us to come into a community like we have all the answers. They have great resources in their communities already. So I like to help them make those connections. So we always invite the local libraries in to be a part of whatever programming we're doing, so that the kids and the staff and everybody can connect with those resources and then have them still when we leave. And so one of the districts we were in recently, we asked the local library to be part of the work we were doing, and they had something called a bookmobile. And essentially it's like a big RV filled with books. And they came to the school during our programming, and the kids had students we worked with, we'd been with them for a large chunk of time, about 3 hours. And so we developed really good rapport. They were feeling motivated, excited about books. And these were kids too that I told E that when we started with them, we asked them, how many of you like to read? And nobody raised their hand. So we spent a good 3 hour chunk of time really working on that motivation piece and talking about the why behind reading. And so anyways, when they got to tour the bookmobile and get books from it, and we specifically pulled out ones that we thought that they would connect with. And it was so fun to watch. They were literally playing rock, paper, scissors, fighting over who was going to get which books. That 3 hours earlier, they had not, said they weren't interested in reading. And that was some resource in their community. So now that bookmobile is going to come back and continue to connect with these kids. And so, that was for sure, of a whole, week-long trip that we had, that was the best moment for me, for sure, to see that.
Love it. Love it. Good, Vondell. We kept you on ice. My apologies. Talk to us, my brother.
Oh, no, it's all good. I think, having this anti-racist, conversation is uncomfortable. Let's just call it what it is, like on both sides, right? On my side, listening both as an educator and as an African-American man, knowing that we are in institutionalized racism, and not so much just the physical sense, but I think just the systems, right? The policies, the procedures. I look at, being an assistant principal, and I was over discipline. That was the system that I was over, and all the policies were racist. And now that same charter school have acknowledged openly that they are anti-racist educational system for charter schools here in Chicago. And when I say that, it was, 15%, just for example, of our student body was African-American, but over 31% of all discipline problems pointed back to the Black boys and Black kids. And when you look at that, that's kind of crazy to think about, that you have 15% of the student body, African-Americans, and yet over 31%, these are the ones who are showing up in, detentions, suspensions, and even expulsions. And we know what that means when a kid get expelled from school. Yes. They've involved themselves in what we call the school to prison pipeline. And those numbers are catastrophic. Mm-hmm. So I think one of my educators, he came to me and he said, look, Singleton, man, this is great. I've been able to impact my classroom as a Black male teacher. But he said, I'm done with education. I said, you done with education? I mean, this is the way that we arm our people. Why are you leaving? He said, there's a level above education. And I said, what is that? He said, to be a policymaker. I'm going into politics. Yeah. I want to run for the alderman. I was like, whoa. And I didn't think about that. So here I am learning. He was like, because look, man, we could impact our classroom or we can impact the system. And he says, I'm more interested as I'm learning and growing to impact the system. I want to know who are writing these policies, who put this in the discipline procedure handbook that said that when a kid get into this situation, this happens every single time. And so we got away from the no tolerance discipline policies, right? And so this is welcomes restorative justice and peace circles. And those are the things that we're doing really on the day to day to say, you know what, we can argue and we can scream, there's a fire, or we can work to put that fire out and rebuild. And I think both sides of the conversation have to be willing to be uncomfortable. This is not an easy conversation. No one has a corner on it, even with all the great books that are coming out around this stuff. And it seemed like the more information come out, the more you have to study because it's all these new terms. And so for me is, how do you feel and what are you doing about how you feel? About what we're seeing in the world. And I think we do have that piece of empowerment. That's why I'm so excited about the Dubai trip, because I know we have young men who never left the block, even going through the experience of getting a passport, this is life changing, that when they go to Dubai and come back, they're going to be like, this is not the south side of Chicago. This is not 69th and 79th and 83rd Street. There's a whole world out there with a whole new system that I can actually not only just be a part of, but I can influence and impact. And my hope is that they come back and say, man, I want to start a business. I want to do trades over in Dubai one day. Like, these are the conversations that I think are freeing and empowering that we have as educators. It's like, yes, we know our history. Yes, it's some crazy stuff that has happened. We can't do anything about it. But what are we doing with the feelings that we have and the power that we have, both as educators and administrators and staff in our school systems?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, and I guess the word that I think is going to be critical for all of us who are listening and, who want to impact change is courage. We just, at the end of the day, man, you have to have the courage to do what's right. And being in the church now since I was about 17 years old. I've been in church since I was 17. I find that the church knows the truth, but oftentimes people aren't courageous enough, to do what's right. And right can be challenging. I would imagine, it's easier for me just because, I'm on the side of being oppressed. So of course, I have a different relationship to it and just feel like, hey, I want to do whatever I need to do to help, not Eric Thomas and not my children. Like I already knew my children were going to be good. I understand the system, right? And I remember my children used to be upset with me because, I put them in Grand Ledge School District. That's where we live. But they were like, yo, we want to go to a charter school. Like we're used to being in a school that's way more diverse. And I was like, I feel you, but get ready for the world as it is. Like that's not what it looked like when you graduate and you go on to college. College is not about to look like your little charter school that's 50-50 or 60-40. Michigan State about to be 93-7. You feel me? And your culture is not going to be the whole 7. Your culture might be 3% of the 7%. And you got to learn how to navigate, through that. My son, you're going to have your challenges. My daughter, you're going to have your challenges. And you got to learn to navigate through that. So for me, it wasn't, I got through, my wife got through, my kids got through. It's like, no. Now what can we do to help everybody? And I'm gonna tell y'all something. I haven't even shared this anywhere, but man, I went to go see. Of course, we took my boy CP. He was one of my graduate assistants when I was at Michigan State. He's a big time comedian now, HBO series, the whole nine, and he's actually CJ's roommate. So he came and did some stuff for the college, and then he got us a hookup where they let us watch, the Black Panther 2. They let us, get that in for free as a group. So my Michigan State students, and I brought some students in from Mumford. So the kids we worked with from Mumford came up, and Chris went to Mumford. And man, I was so excited when I left the movie because I was like, yo, whoever wrote the movie, although it's supposed to be, a Black narrative, like the love they showed the Latino community and Latina community was just like unbelievable. It's like they shared, like they shared the movie with, we're not the only, beautiful community. It was kind of like these are two communities that have both been super oppressed in this country, and so they gave the Latino community, some pub that had the Latino community done its own movie. Of course, it may have gotten, its, people to support, but not necessarily, the global. So they took, hey, everybody coming to see 2, Chadwick passed, there's an energy around it, everybody's pumped up. And then boom, I go and learn about, their culture. I was just like, yo, courageous, super brilliant, diverse, honor, respect. I just thought, and so my boy Felipe, he was also, I was his academic advisor when he was there. He is something big for LCC, like vice president or president or something. And so he came and bought some books. And Danielle, his wife, also was a student and she worked with me at Michigan State. And we were just talking about the movie, man. And we were just like, he was just like, man, y'all showed love. And I felt so proud, even though I didn't direct the movie or write the script or do any of that. I just felt proud that a platform was used, to give honor to another culture, and I just was like, man, that was dope. So I don't know if you guys had an opportunity to see it. If you didn't, please go and check it out.
Twice already.
So good. So good.
All right. So did you notice that as well?
Man, not until you pointed it out. Not like hey, you just said, man. And that's so cool because going back to what Katie was just saying, like we got to be able to see ourselves in these books and movies, just get that esteem. And especially when it's on a mass platform where it's going across the world and there's a rhetoric or narrative about a certain group of people. That's the way you unarm, right? That's the way you use your power through your pen and through your visuals and through your creative genius. And I think, when you pointed that out, I'm like, yeah, it was a whole nother culture. And even to have Shuri acknowledge that this world is beautiful. She kept saying it like, this is beautiful.
Yeah.
So she described what will be not beautiful to a lot of people, right?
Yeah.
And in a movie like that, you give a platform and you give a voice to people who may not have a voice. I just think I haven't noticed that until you just pointed it out.
Yeah.
That was good.
Boom. Say that last line again, Vondell. To give a platform to people whose voices usually aren't uplifted and existed. You said it perfectly. I just can't remember exactly how you said it, but I think, and E, I was thinking about that too, but didn't pull it all together the way that you just described that. But oh my gosh,
that's the GED. That's the GED in me. That's that simplicity.
But I think that right there is another tool when we're thinking about the path to becoming an anti-racist and an actively anti-racist teacher is when you look, and we spoke about books, but when you look all the way across your curriculum, right? What voices are missing? How are you using your power as a teacher to uplift voices and experiences and stories that don't currently exist? And I think, especially for BIPOC leaders and people. And so for me, I know like in biology class, and this was not me specifically, but a group of leaders I was involved with, and they taught me about Henrietta Lacks in biology class. I didn't know who Henrietta Lacks was because when I was in school, I don't think it was in the curriculum unless I just completely forgot, right? And so her cancer cells were taken, without her knowledge, and they became one of the most important tools in medicine. And, her name was left out, her contributions were left out. And now Johns Hopkins and the foundation have done a ton of work to make sure that this is happening. But I think that's like one specific example of looking across your curriculum. What voices are missing? What stories are being told? How are they being told? Who are they being told by? And that's important as we, disrupt the systems that have been put in place.
Yeah. And again, I just want to say as we conclude, courage, use your power, your influence. What's so funny. And again, I promise you guys, I grew up in this, so sometimes what affects some people, it doesn't affect me the same way. It's like, I'm not bothered by it. You know what I'm saying? It's like, I've been dealing with this my whole life, but we recently had, community individuals, making statements, and it's like, one of the things I think is going to be so critical for us to get beyond this, is stop speaking from ignorance, and sometimes like when you don't know, just don't speak on it because you don't know, but a lot of times I think what it exacerbates the challenge is people speak, from a body of ignorance. Like you have absolutely no evidence, you have nothing, and you're making, I would say assumptions, but in many cases, depending on who you are, you're making realizations that aren't real, and you're painting pictures and making people think a certain way. And then, of course, anything that's false is going to continue to be disruptive, But I think it's important for those of us, who are trying to do the right thing, to be courageous enough to do it in the midst of, everything. I tell people all the time, like, yo, this is why I'm doing it, because of this ignorance right here. I'm not about to respond to that ignorance with ignorance, but this is why I'm so adamant about what I do, because these people exist and this is the agenda that they're pushing. And that agenda is not going to help our babies. It's not going to promote the type of academic excellence, that we are as a country that we're capable of, So that would be my final piece as we do the round table is like, yo, use your influence, don't only think about you. As I stated before, no, I'm not a racist, but I do acknowledge that in a very innocent way, I've been biased to my preference and how I like to do things. I am learning, that there are people who have different learning styles, right? They have different learning styles. They like to receive information different, right? They have different strengths. And so it's very important for me to acknowledge that those exist. And how do you do it? You said it, sitting down with people and going, wow, something crazy happened to me even last week. Mustafa called me and he said, Eric, how do you like to receive questions? I was like, yo, that's dope. You know what I'm saying? We had a long discussion about it, because there are people in the community, Vondale, who make an assumption that I don't like structure and I don't like questions. You know what I'm saying? Because of the way they've done it. And I explained to Moose, I was like, oh, Moose, your superpower as a structural person is poking holes in stuff. My superpower is optimism. So when you ask me a question, don't ask me the question as though it can't be done. That's not my superpower. I don't poke holes in stuff. I don't see all the things that could go wrong. That's not my superpower.
That's good.
My superpower is I'm optimistic and I see nothing but. Now, listen to me. Your superpower is important because there are going to be things that if we miss, it's going to affect what we do. And somebody has to be a realist. And somebody has to, but you can't ask me to be that. That's not what I am. So when you ask me the questions, ask them with hope. Ask them with energy. Ask the questions as if we can make this thing happen, and you'll get a total different response than if you come to me and say, well, I know we're not going to be able to raise the money, but what do you think about? I was like, that's not going to work for me, but at the same time, I'm listening to him and I'm going, oh, I respect, you're right. Stuff can go wrong. And you're just thinking about all the stuff that can go wrong. So when I come to you, I'm not going to come to you as super optimistic. I'm going to come to you and go, hey, let me tell you everything that I'm trying to do. And when you get a chance, poke all the holes and then come back to me and let's. So even as an adult, I'm still sitting down with people who have different learning strengths than I have and understanding what those are so that I'm not defensive and go, everybody that talks to me from that perspective, like, yo, don't talk to me. Or you're talking to me and you can sense the aggravation and you can sense that I'm losing, like, why are you talking to me like that? And so it's like we sat down and created some ground rules. We created a style of how we approach and talk to each other. And so to your point, even Moose and Moose had to say to me, hey, remember, I'm from Egypt. My first language is in English and all of my cues are not American. And so, and I was like, yo, Moose, I never thought about that. You speak English so well, know, and you seem to know so much that I assumed. He was like, no, I didn't grow up watching that, or I didn't grow up doing that. And I said, well, why didn't you watch it? Because in your TV shows, my people were always the terrorists. We were always the ones that were blowing stuff up. So for me, I don't particularly watch that stuff because it doesn't speak well of my people. And I was like, brilliant. So again, Sam, to your point, hey, my experience is not the only, you know what I'm saying? Like Alitalia roots is not the only, you know what I'm saying? Him being from Egypt and speaking Arabic and being Muslim, he also has a perspective here in America that is not necessarily always, beneficial. So yeah, be courageous and have the conversations, as Vondell said, and humble yourself and know that your experience is not the only experience. It's not the only American experience.
Yeah, I'll say some, in terms of just this whole conversation, I think it's not exhaustive, right? Like we got to continue to lean into the differences and, being comfortable with being uncomfortable. Yeah. But I think for the greater good of the students that we want to impact is critical. And if you are not sure, as ET mentioned, you haven't done your research or study, I think it's okay to pull experts in, and bring them into your staff so you can have these conversations. But they are critical conversations that I think more people are opening to having. But I think for me, again, use what's in your hands to make change and bring impact and power. Like if there's something in that policy that need to be changed, use your voice or do something about it. But don't just sit there and know that it's impacting your students, your staff, your community, because you refuse to use your voice or to use your power.
Ooh, yes. Yes, Martindale. Yes. And I would just say, for anyone who hasn't engaged in like anti-racist, anti-bias training, I would encourage you to take the courage and, take the leap and operate with courage and do it. Whether that's listening to podcasts, whether it's advocating in your own school system of like, this is important. How can we bring the training in here? Because it doesn't matter what identity you are. We all need to be actively thinking about this, disrupting, because it it's not just the individual person, right? It is the systems that we have to disrupt. And so we have to be in constant reflection, community, unity, and form of disruption to do that. So I would encourage you to pursue your power in that.
Love it. Love it. Love it.
And I will just challenge you to do a book audit on books in your classroom. So just see what is there and how you may decide to add or take away or make some changes. But just do an audit first and see what's there. And parents that are listening, I know there's lots of parents, I challenge you to do the same thing in your homes. So the books that live in our playroom and the dolls that my kids play with, I want to make sure that there are a range of things that my kiddos see in my home as well. And I'm not saying I'm perfect. Like there's places for us to improve in that too. But I'm just challenging you as parents and teachers, just do an audit first and see what already exists and what can we maybe do to impact.
I love it. I love it. You heard it from Mass Impact, y'all. Super excited, man, to be a part of this team, and just so grateful that we're part of the solution and not just the problem. And I do want to encourage those of you who are listening, don't be a part of the problem. Don't be a part of the problem. Be a part of the solution, because there is a solution behind every problem. All right, we're going to send it over to Coach B. Coach B, take it away.
Welcome back, everybody, to Mass Impact, the education podcast. And today we're talking about anti-racist education. Now, this is a topic that can be uncomfortable for some, but we've got to get comfortable having the discussions, sharing opinions, and that's exactly what we did on today's episode. We shared a lot of different and diverse opinions on how we as educators can make a positive impact both in and out of the classroom to really create a change. The first and foremost thing that we discussed was, how do we make these kids feel welcomed and feel loved in the classroom? Now, there's different obstacles that are in our way of making that happen. Of course, racism is one of them, but that's really what we're trying to solve for. How do we make kids feel welcomed and loved in the classroom? Because the reality is that if we want these students to achieve any of the classroom outcomes or the life outcomes that we would want for them, they're going to need to feel that they are in a classroom environment that is conducive to learning. What does that mean? They feel safe, they feel secure, they feel welcomed, they feel loved. They feel like they have the ability to ask questions. They feel like they have the ability to work well with others. All of these different things contribute to creating an environment where the kids feel ready to learn. And that's really, at the end of the day, what creates those outcomes that we want so much for them. So that's what we're solving for. Here's a few action steps that we talked about on today's episode to help us get there. Number one is do an audit of the books that are in your classroom, in your school library, or even in your own home. And same thing applies for movies, TV shows, videos that are played in the classroom, any type of media, posters that are on the wall. The question is this: can each and every student in that classroom see themselves in the books, in the movies, in the posters? Can they see themselves? It's such a critical component, because a lot of times all that we need, children or adults for that matter, is to see somebody that they identify with. They can see themselves in that other person. And when they see that they can do it, now all of a sudden they think that they can do it too. But if all they see are these people who might not look like them, might not talk like them, might have a different culture than them, and they're being successful, but they don't see anyone that they identify with, that can be a huge barrier to them being able to build their self-confidence. And again, it blocks that buy-in in the learning and educational process. I remember even when I was a gymnast, 10, 11, 12 years old, I had never seen another male gymnast who was successful at the sport. I'd never seen it, because in my small town of Huntsville, Alabama, men's gymnastics wasn't really a thing. So obviously this is important with matters of race, culture, ethnicity, all these things. But even on a very general level, as a 13-year-old boy, I had never seen somebody doing the sport that I was really dedicating my life to at that point. I went to gymnastics camp for the first time when I was 15 years old. I saw some other guys my age, looked like me, talked like me, and they flipped like me, but just a little bit better. And they were talking about going to college. They were talking about playing D1 one day. They were talking about even some of them being on the path to the Olympics. And for me, that opened my mind to say, wow, there's really guys out here that are doing this. So no matter what vertical or area it is in, make sure that your students can see themselves in the classroom. That's step number one. Number two is take some time to reflect on the discipline policies in the educational space that you are in. Are there restorative justice practices in place to keep all of our students in school? Listen, we say don't give up all the time. Hey, don't give up. Don't give up on yourself. Don't give up on your dreams. Listen, if we don't want our students to give up on themselves, we need to make sure that we're not giving up on them. Make sure that there are restorative justice policies in place in your educational space. And if there aren't, be that voice of change. Even if you don't feel like you have the power to change anything immediately, you do have the power to start the conversation, to maybe help somebody have a new idea about the way that things are run in your school and your system that maybe would not have happened had you not been willing to use your voice and express your opinion. That's number two. Last but not least, Vondale gave us a challenge. He said, ask yourself, how do you feel and what are you doing about it? Just two simple questions. How do you feel and what are you doing about how you feel? That type of introspection is how we can truly be a part of impactful change in our schools and communities. When you start to understand what it is you're feeling, why you're feeling it, how these emotions are coming about, and then what are you doing about them in a positive way? What might you be doing about those feelings in a negative way? What conscious or subconscious behaviors might be spurring from the way that you feel? Start to really analyze those things, and that will lead to so much more progress than you ever would have imagined previously. Now, as we wrap this episode up, I want to tell you a quick story about a consultation that I had not too long ago. Now, this was more in a business context, but this guy was talking to me and he said, man, how do you define a successful day? What does a successful day look like for you? What is your KPI? Now, in the business world, KPI stands for Key Performance Indicator. It basically means, how do I know measurably that the day was a success, or the task, the project, the business, whatever it is. So in business, oftentimes a KPI could be revenue, or it could be sales calls, or it could be sales made, or whatever it would be. Maybe in a classroom, it would be GPA of the classroom. It would be test scores, standardized test scores. But that's your KPI. It's an indicator of performance. Now, he said, what is your KPI for your life? I said, you know what? Creation is my KPI. He said, that's interesting. Why do you say that? I told him, well, really, creation is the one thing that I can do that nobody else can do. If I create a new idea, if I create a new product, if I create a new video just like this, if I create a new podcast, if I create a new studio in my room that just was made this last weekend, if I create something, if I create a new connection, if I create a new relationship, if I create something, then that's my key performance indicator. If I create a conversation that wouldn't have started without me, if I create a change, if I create a dynamic that wouldn't have existed without my involvement, that's my KPI. If I'm going through the motions, answering emails, nothing's being created. If I'm just going through the motions, watching television, if I'm going through the motions, grading papers, nothing's being created. But if I grade that paper because I have to, and then I go to that student and I have a conversation with them about what maybe they could do better, now I'm creating change in their life. That's creation, and that's my KPI. That's what I want to measure my life by. I want to measure my life by the impact that I have. I want to measure my life by what can I create that wouldn't have existed without my own existence. It's a little bit of a deep thought, but think about that as we talk about this whole concept of anti-racist education. What can you create? What change can you create? What conversations can you create? What ideas can you create moving forward in the school year, moving forward in your life? It's a question that you ought to think about. Until next time, thank you so much for watching Mass Impact, the Education Podcast, and we will see you on the next one.